Hey MTG fans, I hope you're all as excited about BFZ as I am. I haven't gone to the first F&M yet because it's not October 2nd yet, but I've gotten a taste of the cards at the pre-release, and I love this new effect. In fact, the very first card that was spoiled was Avenger of Zendikar, and he had Landfall. As soon as I saw that, I thought, great, Landfall was, it's a reprinted ability. It's really powerful because you get like a free effect or like a free spell almost just for dropping a land into the battlefield, and then accompanying it are more ways to drop in more lands into the battlefield. So why wouldn't you want Landfall? So unfortunately, the Avenger of Zendikar was not actually in battle for Zendikar. He was on the front of the duel decks, but the last time he was printed was Worldwake, with the exception of the 2013 Commander. And obviously the dual deck itself. So that kind of sucks because he has the best landfall ability out of any card, but oh well, guess we'll have to live without him. I still went with green though because they seem to have the most important landfall. I'm actually regretting that a little bit now looking at the cards, but I'm going to stick with it because it's a solid deck. Oh, and of course by deck I mean deck idea. I'm going to name about enough cards to build two decks, really. I find the fun to be in tweaking the deck to make sure that it can beat all my opponents and just dialing it into my exact playstyle and what people are playing at F&M, so feel free to do that. I just don't like it when people say, here, this deck is mathematically the best, play this, and then you get all mad when you lose with it because it's just not perfect for you. So, just take my advice on cards that go together loosely and just build it from there. That's always way more fun. So for landfall triggers, whether it be a creature or a spell, I'll start with that section. Now the obvious first one is Scythe Leopard. Everybody loves him because he's just a 1/1 for 1 and he gets a little bit bigger till end of turn when a land comes in. So if you were to trigger landfall 5 or 6 times, he's really good for 1 mana, and then he might get a cheap attack on turn 2, who knows. Very, very similar is the Snapping Gnarlid. He's a 2/2 for 2 with the exact same effect on landfall. So if you had both of those in your deck, I think they're just perfect base monsters to start with. But then going on from there, you've got a very strange one, Undergrowth Champion. Now this is a mythic. The price is a little bit high on him. He's not that great, but the overall concept of landfall, at least with green, is to swing, 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 swing every single turn. There's very little ambush, so you just want to try to get through, maybe get a trample through, or at least just do damage by swinging with 4 when they have 3 defenders, and then not getting them killed, and then having some defense. So going with that theme, this is a pretty good card because you can swing with them. He's going to get a lot bigger than his 3 mana suggests, and then he can block and just prevent all damage. Now it's not even combat damage, it's all damage. So if somebody were to hit him with like a lightning strike type, red spell, you could just remove a counter and he's good. Now that will shrink him, but it's kind of like repetitive anti-magic, repetitive indestructible blocking, sort of. So I could kind of see it. Plus, anybody who gets a +1/+1 counter and leaves it, not a temporary bonus, is exceptional because there's very, very few of those. So this would be perfect in the deck, and it's one of the only 3 costs. Now next we've got the Retreat to Kazandu, which is, the typical retreat card. There's one for every color. The landfall effect is, of course, choose one. You can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, which is huge because with Undergrowth Champion, you're going to be doing that anyway. He uses normal +1/+1 counters to use his ability, and, the counters aren't going anywhere, so this is obviously what the whole deck is built around, so you definitely want 4 of them, and they're an uncommon, so they're going to be pretty cheap. The other effect is you gain 2 life. Now that's not as good. If you're in a pinch and you really need to keep swinging, or you need to be able to take all the damage they can deal, or they're trampling past you, or they're flyers, and you forgot to put in Plummet, that's a good effect. You're not going to help yourself win, so I would definitely stick to the first one if possible, but gaining 4 to 6 life every turn because you're double dropping lands, that's pretty discouraging by itself. Now next there's a creature that I don't think is that good, but if you're looking for a really cheap deck, this one is a perfect turn 1 card, I guess. So let's say turn 1 you throw him down. Jedi Offshoot, or Jedi, not really sure. We'll just say Jedi, how about that? It's a Jedi tree. I think Yoda's in there somewhere. So you drop it in for 1. He's a defender, he's 0-3, and then the landfall effect is you gain 1 life. You don't have to pay anything or tap him, you just gain 1 life. So for the entire rest of the turn, the game, let's say you drop in 12 lands, which is probably pretty typical, you just went to 32 life. Obviously not at once, obviously they're hitting you, but that's pretty good. I mean, because you can block them for at least a couple turns. I mean, I don't think there's even a 3-2 for 2 in the set. So, definitely a good card, it just doesn't help you win, and you're going to need to win pretty quickly with this. This will help you stall, though, so if they're playing, I don't know, maybe some kind of weird, like, high aggro speed deck, or I would say probably a dash deck would be the most appropriate. This would just crush a dash deck. Now, next up, we've got a creature that I don't love, but I think the positive and the negative balance out. It's a 3-3 for 4, so that's great, and the landfall effect is you may pay 4, and one of them has to be green. Then if you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters, obviously permanent counters, on her. So then she'll be a 5-5, then a 7-7, then a 9-9. So that could happen really quickly, especially if the land that you're dropping in is not tapped, which there are many ways to do that. So I still think she's pretty perfect. I would love to not go higher, but this is green we're talking about, so of course we're going to go higher. The next landfall creature costs 5, and it's a 4-4, so that's cool. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, the Territorial Baloth gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So that's a lot bigger, especially if you're using the retreat card to drop a counter on him. So definitely not bad. I mean, if he swings, he could be the size of an Eldrazi by the time you swing. I mean, if you start dropping land during your first main phase, and then play a sorcery to drop in 1, 2, or 3 more lands, and then swing in the middle of combat and drop in another land doing another trigger, he's going to be absolutely huge. I just wish he had trample. And this deck is so heavy on landfall and causing land to come in that trample isn't really in it. So that's a little bit of a problem. The final landfall creature / card would be the Oran Reef Hydra. He has trample by himself. He's a 5/5 for 6, so keeping with that mathematical pattern. And then this is just unreal. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on him. If it's a forest, put 2 on him. So he's going to get just absolutely huge. He's right on par with the Managorger Hydra. So that natural trample is just outrageous because, like I said, there's almost no spell that can grant it in this deck, or really at all. I mean, the God cards are gone, so Hunter's Prowess is gone. It's just not that easy to grant trample anymore. So that's already 8 cards. I mean, most decks have 4 sets of 10, so that equals 40, and then plus 20 lands, give or take. So, feel free to cut them out. Those are just all of the landfallers. So whatever you think is the most valuable, or however long you think you can stall the opponent, or maybe mix it in with your sideboard, whatever you think is appropriate. But I'm going to move on to the category of land droppers. These are cards that bring out land. I'm only going to mention the best of the best of the best. I left out cards that are just mediocre and just aren't good enough. So the obvious star of it is the old, not worth much card, Animus Awakening. It's a sorcery, people don't like that, but hello, Landfall, come on. But this came out before Landfall, so it was not considered to be a good card, so you might still be able to pick it up dirt cheap before it becomes big. But for 1+X, you reveal the top X cards from your library, put all land cards from among them into the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. So if you see a really good card that you only have 2 of in the deck, you just buried it, so you're never going to pull it. So that is unfortunate unless you shuffle your library. So if you shuffle your library, well, that means usually you just went and got a land out of it. So you're going to be shuffling every single turn. So that is not a problem. So Landfall is what this card was built for. Then Spell Mastery, which is kind of hard because you're going to be creature heavy. If there are 2 more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, untap those lands that you just put in. So you almost get all the mana back from the spell. well, at least at like a 50% rate if you're going extremely land heavy. So I really like this. The only downfall is that if you've already pulled a ton of lands out of your deck, this will not hit very many of them, because just percentage-wise, there's not that many. Now, this does chain with a certain other land that I'll mention later, though. So, if you think you could get this to work, good, because it will trigger landfall multiple times. I mean, if you started with a 30-30 deck with 30 lands, you really shouldn't have a problem triggering landfall a whole bunch of times. Now, originally it was thought that this card is stupid because you have to have mana to go get mana, and if you already have it, you don't need it. So it was considered pointless, but like I said, this practically should have been in Battle for Zendikar. I mean, it's just unbelievably for landfall. Well, since we were just talking about creatures, I might as well mention Nissa. She only costs 3, she's a 2/2, so pretty crappy creature by herself. But as the second that she enters the battlefield, you go get a forest, a basic forest, so it has to be a basic forest. Reveal it, and then put it into your hand. You don't even get to put it onto the battlefield. So, kind of a whippy land fetch, but whatever. But then, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, so basically landfall, if you control 7 or more lands, doesn't have to be forests, you exile her and flip her. So, not bad. I mean, she goes and gets a land, so you can for sure drop one during your first main phase, I guess you would say. But once she's a planeswalker, the +1 is pretty good because you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, then put it into the battlefield, straight in. And it's not considered playing it, so you could double up on lands that way. And then it says otherwise put it in your hand, so you win either way. The only problem is she comes out with 3 loyalty. I don't like that. But her -2 is put in a legendary 4/4 green elemental token named Ashaya. Now it is legendary, so not much negative going on there, but it's nice to do once. And then you've got a 4/4 green elemental, so you could chump block it. Because it's legendary, you could bring it back out. You could technically attack with it during combat phase, and then once it's tapped, -2 her in your second main phase, and then use it untapped as a blocker due to the legendary destruction rule. So, kind of neat. But then -7 is outrageous. Untap up to 6 target lands, they all become 6/6 elemental creatures. They're still lands, so you can still tap them for mana, but there's 6/6 elemental creatures, and there's 6 of them. And you really shouldn't have trouble blocking with your other creatures to cover Nissa. So once she comes out, you're going to keep triggering landfall, but you could just turtle, as they say, which is just go all defense, all blocking, until you can bring out 6/6 elementals. I mean, that would quite possibly end the game by itself right there, because there's just not a lot of creature removal, and if there is, there's not a lot of mass creature removal, and if there is, it's not big enough to take out a 6/6. So, big problems. Now, I don't know if I would put more than 2 Nissas in there, mostly due to cost and because, you can't have multiple, you don't want to be drawing dead, that sort of thing. But then there's Nissa's Renewal. Hey, why not? It costs 6, but, you're going to be dropping in tons of land, so honestly, you could technically play that on turn 3 or 4 if you're really lucky. Search your library for up to 3 basic land cards of any type, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library, you gain 7 life. So, you're going to get a triple landfall trigger, and then you're going to get 7 life to help you not die. So, I wish it wasn't a sorcery, but all the really powerful cards are. It's a sign of a powerful card. So, just the fact that it drops out exactly 3 every single time for only 6, and then you gain a buttload of life, I like it. I might not put 4 of them in there because it's just not that great on, turn 1 through 5, but it's pretty darn good after that. Next, we've got to move on to yet another sorcery. It only costs 2, though. Very, very nice, and it's common. You look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them, which is pretty much the whole deck. And then, whatever one you pick, you showed it to your opponent, but you put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So once again, you could be burying a Nissa. You could be burying something that you need. But you could just put anything into your hand. I mean, it's all land and creatures in this type of deck. Very, very few enchantments and instants and sorceries. So you're almost guaranteed to hit something. And then you either use a creature to get more landfall and more aggro, more blocking, or you use a land to drop in another land, assuming you haven't already that turn. So definitely, definitely very nice. Now, there's one more interesting card, Map the Wastes. It's from Fate Reforged. I've seen people play it with pretty good results, and that was before landfall was a thing. So you basically search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, so another free play, another double play, and then shuffle your library, of course, and then bolster one. So one of your creatures gets bigger, and it's the weakest one, which is almost always a good thing. So it gets a +1/+1 on it, and it's not going anywhere. So better than a temporary boost. I wish it cost 2, but it costs 3. So not a bad card. I don't know if it would be the first one I'd put in my deck, but if you really want to drop lands and up your aggro, it's not a bad idea. Speaking of old cards, we've got one that I predicted might be a thing, but this is a bit of a stretch. Trail of Mystery. It's not legendary, now keep that in mind, and it only costs 2. It's also a 25-cent rare, so anybody could afford it. Whenever a face-down creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. I wish it was onto the battlefield, but that wouldn't cost 2 and it wouldn't not be legendary. But whenever a permanent you control is turned face up, if it's a creature, it temporarily gets +2/+2 till end of turn. That's kind of neat, whatever. I guess if you manage to get something out, leave it there for a turn, then flip it, it's kind of cool because it's a lot of aggro. So a lot of power packed into this 2 mana. Now, you obviously know what's coming next. Whisperwood Elemental. At the beginning of your end step, manifest the top card of your library. So now a creature entered the battlefield face down, so you get to go get a land. Now, unfortunately, during your end step, you're putting a card into your hand, so you're sort of prepping for the next turn in which you might draw a land during your draw step. But it sort of is a chain combo that guarantees that you're going to be able to put a land into play every single first main phase naturally. So kind of nice, but then the best part is sacrifice Whisperwood Elemental until the end of turn. Face up non-token creatures you control gain when this creature dies, manifest the top card of your library. Let's say people play the new 5-cost white board wipe. Okay, in response, sacrifice Whisperwood Elemental. Now they wipe out 8 of your creatures and you manifest 8. Chances are you're better off than they are right then. So otherwise a board wipe would just ruin this deck, so that's why I think the combination of those 2 cards is not too bad. The only problem is that they have to find each other, but you're going to be drawing cards left and right, you're going to be removing a lot of land from your deck, so if you manage to put these 2 cards in there, it's not a bad idea because you'd probably be playing 30 lands and 30 non-lands, so you're probably going to pull these pretty quickly because you'd be filtering out the lands, 2 or 3 per turn. Next we've got a horribly uninteresting, very overblown, very overrated card. It's complete crap. It's a sorcery, it costs 2. Oh boy. You search your land for a land card. Oh, then you reveal it and put it in your hand, not even on the battlefield. Why is everybody so excited? Because you could go get a non-basic land. Oh joy. I guess in an Eldrazi deck you could go get some kind of temple or that old gods card, whatever. In this deck, it's completely pointless, but at least you get to go get a land card, reveal it, and put it in your hand. There are better ways to do it, but I thought I'd mention it just because everybody's all excited about the card. I think it's completely overrated, especially in mono. But next we've got, oh yes, I love it, Swell of Growth. Not only is it an instant, so you can use it as a defensive ambush, but you can use it as an offensive ambush. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Now remember, it's an instant, so in the middle of their turn you can put a land onto the battlefield from your hand. So that is just unbelievable. I mean, I don't even need to explain why that's powerful. You can trigger Landfall off your turn with mana that you're about to get back during your turn that you didn't need. So do it during their end step, do it defensively, do it as an ambush, on defense, offense, anything. This card has to be in your deck. Now you all know what's coming, obviously, because, well, you've seen my other videos, I assume, but let's start first with Blighted Woodland. That's a nice non-basic land. You can tap it for colorless, not a huge deal, not a lot of double green in this deck. But then you can pay 4, tap it, and sack it to go into your library and take up to 2 basic land cards, then put them onto the battlefield tab. Very, very nice. It's an automatic double shuffle, and you could already have this on the battlefield. The only thing is you're going to see it coming compared to an instant or a sorcery, but at least you can do it absolutely any time. So during their end step, go get 2 more land, put them on the battlefield. Now, Landfall doesn't work as well during their end step, but you could technically do it during their first main phase or the second that they declare attackers, which would be even better. So definitely a good defensive card because you can trigger Landfall twice. All your creatures are most likely larger now until end of turn, so very nice. And then of course we've got the much improved artwork, Evolving Wilds, the staple, I guess you would say, going back into antiquity. All you do is sack it, go get a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped. So definitely a slow land, but it's a way to go get a basic land, drop it into the battlefield, and trigger Landfall off your turn. You almost always do it, either during their end step or sometime during their turn. So if you can make your creatures larger on defense as a surprise in the middle of combat, that's huge. So there's a lot of that in this deck. And, Green Ambush, it doesn't seem like it's a big thing in this set, but it is with Landfall. So gotta have an Evolving Wilds. Now this next one is very, very optional. It's a Fertile Thicket, it comes in tapped, but it does generate green. Now when it enters the battlefield, you may, so you don't have to, look at the top 5 cards of your library, and if you do so, reveal up to 1 basic land card from them, put that on the top of your library, so you don't even get it in your hand, but you will guarantee that you draw it next turn, and then put the rest on the bottom in any order. So I wish you could activate that whenever you wanted when this was already on the field, but I don't know, it will help you ramp early game. Like if you somehow manage to start with only 2 lands in your opening hand instead of more, since you're probably going to go with a 50-50 deck, this would do it. This would let you put that next land right on top, make sure that you draw it. I mean, if you pull 5 and you don't see a basic land in it, technically those are going to the bottom, so you're probably going to pull a land after that. So even if it misses, it still hits. So I do kind of like this. I think I would probably throw 4 in there. Okay, finally, I'll just get to it. Sword of the Animus, the god of battle for Zendikar. This is the greatest card in every single deck. Even if you're playing Eldrazi, it's perfect. If you're playing Landfall, it's perfect. If you're playing Allies, it's perfect. This is the greatest card ever printed for this new block. So, anyway, equipped creature gets +1/+1, so it makes your creatures bigger. You can't really get rid of it because if the creature wearing it dies, you just move it to the next creature over. I love that. It's only 2 to equip, 2 to get out, and it's colorless. Can't ask for anything more than that. But whenever the equipped creature attacks, that's all they have to do is attack. You may search immediately, before they choose defenders, your library for a basic land card, then put it on the battlefield tapped. So, right in the middle of combat, you just triggered Landfall. So all your creatures are bigger. Some of your creatures might have gotten counters. You could gain 2 life if you had the retreat card out. And you're doing all that in the middle of combat automatically until they manage to blow up this artifact. Now it is legendary, so I might drop it to 3 in my deck, but that's it. I wouldn't go to 2 or you'll never draw it in a game. Or at least not in every game, which is what you would want to do, is draw it in every single game. So if you've already brought out, triggered Landfall 5 times, you probably have about 8 lands on the battlefield at least. So 2 to move it, or 2 to cast it, 2 to move it to a new creature, re-equip it. That's just unbelievably simple. I mean, it's so easy to do. In fact, you could, during your first main phase, equip it, swing, and then that creature dies, and during your second main phase, use even more mana to move it to a new creature, and then you could use the +1/+1 defensively. So this is the best card in any Landfall deck. I absolutely love it. Now, I'm not sure that these are necessarily at all necessary in your deck, but I noticed that some of the creatures get really big, so if you don't have very much Landfall in, you might want to put these in their place. Or I should say Landfall causers, like land droppers. If you've got a whole bunch of Landfall creatures, then you might need these. So the first guy, he costs 2, he's a 1/1, so that's a problem. He has haste, great, so he can use his tap ability when he comes in, or attack, I guess. And you can add 1 mana of any color, so great. So you might have Converge in your deck or something, I don't know. But then you can spend the mana only on a creature spell, and that's why I hate this guy. I don't think he's very good. Then you've got the old Leaf Gilder. She's just a 2/1 for 2, and she taps for 1. It's an Elvish Mystic on steroids, so not bad. A little bit of aggro, though. But the lateness, the fact that it can't come out for 1 mana, I don't love it. Next, we've got the Lifespring Druid. Now, she costs 3 and is only a 2/1 and doesn't have haste, but then you can add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It's just not that important if you're not playing Converge, and that's really late and really slow and really not good at combat. And then, of course, the fourth one is probably the best one out of all of them, but it's a little rough in Landfall. Whisper of the Wild. So it's a 0/2 for 2, so a little bit of a blocker. Can block tokens, which isn't really a huge thing right now, but goblins, who knows. You tap it for sure for 1, and then if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you can tap it for 2 green mana. So that's really nice if a lot of your creatures get counters as opposed to temporary bonuses. So you might want to consider that. But it's better to just use all your efforts to just drop in more land, because then you trigger Landfall, and then you get to keep the land every single turn. You end up blocking with this guy, losing mana, and you start going the wrong direction really quickly. Now this card I'm mentioning because it's just really good. It's the only control card I picked for this deck because it's just so hilarious. Yes, it costs 4. Yes, it's a sorcery, but you probably have it. You probably have the amount of land by turn 3. So it kind of reminds me of Return to the Earth, which I believe is also still legal, by the way, so you might want to consider that. But destroy target artifact, okay. Enchantment, okay. Or land, hello. So that's actually pretty cheap for land destruction, and land destruction in green, that's kind of weird. So they brought back land exile in black. They brought back land destruction with that crumble card from red, but that one costs 6, the other one costs 5. This one only costs 4, and it also will guard against an artifact or enchantment. So you can just dump this in the place of a less important spell or just a basic 1/1 landfall creature like the leopard, and you're all set to destroy whatever they're doing. Now, you may have noticed the theme that you're going to have a buttload of lands out. That's the point of Landfall. You get to drop in multiple lands on your turn for free. 1 naturally and then multiple after that, like the sword. Or, drop in 3 at a time. Well, now you've got a lot of mana to work with. So why does every creature have to have Landfall? Why not just drop in an absolute beast, like a 6 or 7 cost? So this is my choice for absolute beasts. Gaia's Revenge, everybody loves this card. I don't know why this never became a huge card, because it's just so stupidly powerful. Come on, people. It's an elemental, hard to boost. I mean, the last one I know of is a Master of Waves deck, so that's weird, but who cares? By itself, it can't be countered. They cannot counter the spell. It has haste, so when it comes into the battlefield, it's already a problem. Then it can't be the target of non-green spells or abilities from non-green sources. If you're playing a mirror match, they better just have one of these, because, Plummet isn't going to kill him. There's really not much in green that will remove him. Nissa's not going to do anything about him. And he's an 8/5 with haste. He doesn't have trample, but he doesn't need it. Who cares? He's going to wipe out one of everything. He's going to start taking out Eldrazi one at a time. So, I really, really, really like this guy. The only problem is in this particular deck, there's no way to boost him. Other than, I think, like 1 card I mentioned, because he doesn't technically have Landfall, but he could just win the game by himself. I really, really, really like him. Next, we've got the Mana Gorger Hydra. Now, this doesn't have Landfall, but it doesn't need to. It's more important that, yeah, it's a 1/1 for 3, okay, but it has Trample. You don't have to grant it Trample, it just has it. And then whenever a player, besides you or your opponent, casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on him. Now, considering all the land you're dropping in, you're going to be just casting your whole hand and then top decking. So if you can get him out early or even late game, your opponents are going to be casting up a storm trying to stop you, and then you're going to be dropping in everything you pull all the time. So, yeah, +1/+1 counters like more rapidly than Landfall. So I would definitely put him in the deck. He's almost like better than Landfall. Now next we've got one of my favorites, because I just love the artwork, I love the name, I love everything about him. It does cost 7, but he's a Plated Crusher, and he has Trample and Hexproof. That is almost exactly effectively the same as Gaia's Revenge, so I find that kind of weird, but he does have Trample. So I would actually say he trumps Gaia's Revenge, but he doesn't have haste, so they have 1 more turn to get rid of him, except that he's Hexproof. So kind of a problem there. But he's a 7/6 with trample, so they can't stop that except with an 8/8 Eldrazi, pretty much. I mean, there's not much else that would naturally be expected to stop him, so definitely a good card. And then finally, we've got the Woodland Wanderer. He does cost 4 for a 2/2, that sort of sucks, but why he's good is Vigilance and Trample. That is it. I mean, Vigilance and Trample, a free attack every turn plus Trample. The only problem is Converge. So you could put in those guys that tap for any color of mana and start getting creative, pay a full 4 for him. Then he'd come out as a 6/6 for 4. Kind of hard to do, though. So he enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on him for each color of mana spent to cast him. So he could reasonably be a 4/4, a 5/5, 6/6. I might leave him for a 2-color deck or more, but even by himself, if you were to just put in the different mana generators, or like put in a dual land or an old life land or something weird, you could generate a couple colors of mana reasonably. So if he was the full-blown 6/6 with Vigilance and Trample, you're going to win the game with him unless they bring out something really big. And then if they do, just use him as a blocker, because you got him and then another giant guy, double block, no problem. And believe it or not, that is it for this deck. I probably missed a couple cards that might be kind of interesting, but most of the cards are very, very late. They're very recent that go together with this. So I pretty much picked out the best old cards that I remembered myself personally that brought in lands or multiple lands, but if I missed something, feel free to put it in the comments. This is obviously a really, really, really easy deck to operate. I mean, I think a chimpanzee could operate it because you just dump lands. You don't really have to miss a trigger because every single trigger is landfall, so just keep that in mind. So definitely a good beginner deck. I think it really could just run away on your opponent really quickly, and they just couldn't do it. They wouldn't have the ability to stop that level of aggro. If they were playing like tokens, or they were bringing Eldrazi out and it was all Scions, or even if they brought out 1 or 2 really large or mid-size Eldrazi, this is still just going to run them over. And then there's just enough ambush to ruin their plans. So a little bit of surprise, a lot of bit of aggro, and a monstrous amount of land on the field. And who doesn't want to run a 30/30 deck and actually have it work? So I'm definitely going to build this deck, bring it to FNM. I don't expect it to be like God's gift to the World Tournament or anything. The next Grand Prix, I don't think this will top 16, but who knows? I did notice that if you were to mix, especially white or blue, and then go with an all landfall deck, it would have to be primarily green with a little bit of splash of white or blue, and then use a bunch of gold cards. But their landfall effects are a little bit better, so I think you could get a little bit more creative and then use some of the converge cards a little bit better. It would still be a really big deck, though. It might have to go over 60, which is really good, or really bad, pardon me. So might want to try building it, see if it works. Let me know if you build it, and verse your friends with it and how it works out. Now, some of you have seen all my videos are wondering why at the end I don't say the stupid YouTube cliche of like and subscribe and follow me on Twitter, and I'm on Twitch streaming my whole entire life, and I'm eating breakfast on Twitch right now, and here's my Facebook page, and here's this, and here's that. I don't care. That's stupid and annoying. You're just watching my videos to watch my videos, so that's why I make them. I'm just, making timely videos, so really, honestly, it's a good idea to subscribe, because then you'll be notified immediately, because I tend to do videos about what's going on exactly right now. I don't cover, the meta and the shifts and who's bringing what to what Grand Prix. I don't really care about that because I'm not going to the Grand Prix, but, new deck ideas and new sets, a little bit of advanced information and good combos, just to give you a little bit of an edge at FNM, hopefully, or just for kitchen table gaming against your friends. So they're all, like I said, very timely. They're very, about the sets that come out, which is why all my videos lately have been about Battle for Zendikar. But you don't want to really miss one, because then it might not be as relevant. So hit subscribe if you want, if you're not already subscribed to 100 people, and I will see you next time.